I'm going to go ahead and introduce our great speaker for tonight. You guys are in for a treat. David Long began in forensics as a competitor at J.P. McCaskey in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He competed in cross-X debate. You'll have to tell us a little bit about cross-X debate. With me being a little newer to speech and debate, I wasn't familiar with that event. So you'll have to tell us a little about that, Coach Long. He also competed in Student Congress, which is fitting, and Boys Extemporaneous Speaking. His senior year, he was the Pennsylvania High School Speech League PHSSL District Number 7 Boys Extemp Champ and a PHSSL state finalist. After graduating from college, he was the assistant coach for a year at Quakertown High School, where he competed in a local league called the Academic Challenge League. Mr. Long then was the assistant coach for Lower Merion High School for a year, coaching cross-X debate and speech events. In the 92-93 school year, he then began the team at Southern Lehigh High School and has coached all speech and debate events there. Southern Lehigh joined the PHSSL in 92 and has since joined the NCFL and the NSDA. David has been the lead director for the Allentown Diocese Forensics League of the NCFL since 95 and serves on the NSDA Valley Forge and PHSSL District 8, number 8 committees since 1999. He presently serves as the PHSSL District Number 8 Chair and also as the PHSSL State Tournament Coordinator. As for the NSDA, he's a tab room staff person for Congressional debate, and I'm very happy to say is the co-chair for the Asian American Coach Caucus. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Coach David Long.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Cross-X debate is also called policy debate. So if that sounds a little more familiar, that's just how we call it. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for this webinar. And the one thing I always like to say when I do any judge trainings and things of that sort is on behalf of the students that you are going to be judging or that you are going to be helping out because you're helping out a team and judging because they have a requirement. Thank you very much for your time and your dedication to speech and debate, which I obviously as a competitor think was one of the best things I ever got to do. And when I started teaching, I wanted to make sure that I was able to get that to my students as well. And so that's why I'm here still. And so again, thank you all very much for taking the time out of your evening for some training in terms of congressional debate. The topic I was asked to come up with, and I'll start sharing my screen, is the idea of congressional debate judging for the beginner. And the one thing I always say is don't ever be hesitant to judge a particular event. I know a lot of times when I help run tournaments, again, I'm the Pennsylvania High School Speech League State Tournament Coordinator. My school runs its own invitational tournament. You always run into judges, and this isn't disparaging of them. They're hesitant. Oh, I've never judged that before. I've never done this before. If you can go in and just say, okay, let me see what this is all about, you may find out that it's such a wonderful experience and it may be your new favorite event. And congressional debate is one of those events that has that little issue sometimes is when I get people assigned to Congress, all of a sudden like, oh, I've never done Congress before. I don't know what to do. It's not bad. It's actually quite a lot of fun, and I hope you'll enjoy it as well. And so again, the title of this webinar is the idea of congressional debate for the beginner. And so let me start my presentation, share my screen with you all, and we'll be underway. All right, first of all, the thing to consider is what is congressional debate? What is this event that you now have been thrown into? The one thing, and I know the NSDA changed the name of it maybe 10, 15 years ago at this point, because they wanted to emphasize that it's a debate event, but also, why call it? It used to be called Student Congress. And I think the view was, well, all of our events involve students. However, I always liked the name Student Congress because I could very easily say to people who are like, well, what is this? It is literally what it sounds like. It is a Congress of students. And so I always like being able to say that, because then I could say the idea is that they're going to be debating legislation. And the idea there, this is student submitted legislation we'll get to in a moment. But the idea is that this is a Congress of students, and they are taking on the role of a congressional legislator. And so, like I said, there is going to be legislation that they're debating. They're going to be participating in parliamentary procedure. So they are going to be making motions and having, voting on their particular legislation and making amendments, et cetera, et cetera. And so once I'm able to start saying that, people are like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. And the one thing to keep in mind throughout this presentation and throughout your judging of Congress is that role of a congressional legislator. And there was a gentleman who I met through the NSDA who was a phenomenal congressional debate person in the NSDA, a man by the name of Harold Keller. And he said to me at one point, or he said to a group of us at one point, that Congress takes all three genres of debate, public speaking, and interpretation and puts it together. And that's, I think, a great way of looking at it, is that the students are, again, taking on that role of being a legislator. So they're almost doing an interpretation event where they're a congressperson. Obviously, they're also doing public speaking. They are presenting their ideas, their thoughts and ideas to each other. And they are obviously doing a debate event, because they are addressing each other's arguments and addressing any misunderstandings or clashes in ideas. And so that is part of what this debate event is. And the one thing which I have up there is one person who is a special member of the debate chamber, as they're referred to, is the presiding officer. Because if you think about the US Senate or the House of Representatives, you also think of the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate, or the Vice President, as it were, who runs the Senate. And so that person has a special role. And so even in our competition, there is a presiding officer who is a student who is running the chamber. And we'll hear about this a little bit later, the idea of like taking that into account, that you have this student who is stepping out of the debate and basically organizing the chamber and making sure the chamber runs smoothly, so that everybody else can get in their speeches and question and make their motions, etc., and run it smoothly. And so that's what's involved with, that's why that I kind of have that as its own special little item, is that we have this Congress of students, including, as it were, a Speaker of the House, and so we have that. That's the roles of our students. The one thing to keep in mind is that congressional debate takes a bit longer than other debate events and other speech events as well. In many tournaments, at least for us in Pennsylvania, for our local areas, a lot of times the congressional debate judges are taken out of the speech pool, because the Lincoln Douglas debaters are just judging Lincoln Douglas, or public forum debate is just judging public forum, or policy or cross-ex debate is just judging that, because of the schedule. And so oftentimes Congress is taken out of the speech pool. But the one thing is, congressional debate does take a bit longer than a normal speech round, because it is a group debate. It is all, 18, 20, however many students may be in the chamber. Maybe nowadays they've been trying to pare it down a little bit to maybe 15 to 18 students in a chamber. But the idea is, and the National Speech and Debate Association set this up several years ago, is in terms of timing. The idea is you say how many students are in there, and they each get 10 minutes. And you'll see it in a bit. The speeches are typically 3 minutes long, and there's a minute of questioning, et cetera, et cetera. So roughly they say, okay, everybody gets 10 minutes to do 2 speeches. So if you have 12 students in a chamber, that's 120 minutes. That's 2 hours. If you have 18 students, that's 3 hours. And most speech rounds last maybe an hour and a half at most. So it is a longer session, but it's a little more dynamic, I would say, because again, there are these speeches and there are motions and there's questioning and everything. So it becomes very, very dynamic. And so that's the thing to keep in mind, is that it does take a bit longer, and it is done, as it were, en masse. And so again, you may have a chamber of 12 to 15, 18 students, and not that you're judging them all simultaneously, but you're listening to them, and I'll go through this in a bit. You're going to listen to them and give them comments, and keep in mind who is standing out to you again in that role of a congressional debater, a congressional legislator. All right, tapping on. All right, the first thing that I want to go through is what exactly will they be debating? As I mentioned, they are going to be actually debating legislation, but the idea is that this is legislation that they created themselves. Oftentimes, tournament directors will send out an invitation, say, okay, our tournament is going to be on whatever day, and 2 weeks ahead of time, we would like to publish our legislation packet. And so the students will, or the coaches will go to their students, say, okay, this tournament would like to get our legislation by, I'll just say, May 15th, and the tournament is on May 30th. And so we need to get some legislation in there. And so the students will have come up with legislation. And there are two main types of legislation, but there is actually a third one that I put on here as well. And the difference between them is what I'm going to go through now. First of all, what I have up here is a template for a legislation that is a bill. And the thing to keep in mind is that a bill, when it is passed, and the students will bring this out, is when this is passed, it will become a law. And if you want to go back to the Schoolhouse Rock of the 1970s, I'll show my age a little bit. The idea, yes, once a bill is passed, it becomes a law. And so the idea is when the students are looking through this, they're saying, okay, what are going to be the benefits of this as a law? Or what are going to be the problems of this as a law? And so the idea is, again, the title there, a bill to do something to achieve something. And so the idea is that section 1, you notice they're going to state a new policy. What will be this new law? Section 2, and the one thing is, this is not exactly how laws, when they're passed by the real Congress, quote unquote, look. It's more, again, for to create the debate and be an educational activity for the students. So section 2 is defining ambiguous terms that are not clear or that are very technical. And then section 3, as it says there, who's overseeing this? Is this the Department of Agriculture? Is this the IRS? Is this the EPA? Who is going to actually look over this or be watching over this? And the one thing also, which I don't think is mentioned here specifically, but I know usually comes up, is also, where is funding coming from? Who is going to be funding this, and who is going to be overseeing it? And then the last section, a lot of times the very last sentence is pushed out as its own section, but it depends on just the formatting. When does this take effect? And then the statement, all laws in conflict with this legislation are declared null and void. Basically, what that does is it prevents the students from having to worry about, well, this is going to contradict this law, or this is going to contradict this law. So it's just like, okay, we're just going to say this will now be the new law of the land, shall we say. And so don't worry about, okay, it's going to contradict this one and this one and this one. So that is the first type of legislation that the students oftentimes will deal with. The next one then is what is called a resolution. Notice at the beginning of it, first of all, the title of resolution to, again, do something to achieve some goal. But notice that it starts off with whereas clauses. It is not going to become a law. Again, with a bill, this section, this section, this section, those will become laws. But the idea of the resolution is it is saying, here's what we have in our present system, or as everyone likes to call the status quo. Here is what the situation is. And notice that says the first whereas clause states the current problem. Notice that it should be in one brief sentence. And then you can go into the next whereas clause, describe how large, what's the magnitude and scope of this problem. Next whereas, what are the impact and harms? And then you'll notice the fourth one kind of is the open additional whereas clauses as needed. And so I've seen legislation where it is 4 whereas clauses. I've seen where it's maybe 7 whereas clauses. In any case, the idea is the whereas clauses are showing what is existing right now in our present system. And then notice the second to last line is, therefore be it resolved. And that's why it's a resolution that the Congress here assemble, and then you describe what the action is. And then if you need to, if there's going to be a second step, that's why the last one, it says, be it further resolved. And then if you're going to have a second step, as it were. So again, the difference is that a resolution is how the Congress feels, or what the Congress thinks should happen, but not necessarily that they're going to make it happen right now. Very often, resolutions are written to describe what the Congress feels should happen because it's not necessarily in their jurisdiction. So, for example, they may say, all right, states need to change their drinking age from 21 to 18. I know that's actually something I've seen before, because some people are saying, well, you can be drafted at 18, so your drinking age should be 18. And so the Congress wants states to change that. Congress doesn't have the power to change a state's drinking age. And so it will stand resolved that the state should do this, but it cannot make the states do this. The other example, which oftentimes come into play, is international situations. So obviously, given the situation with Ukraine right now and Russia, there are maybe resolutions out there that are saying that, the Congress here assembled is resolved that the United Nations or NATO or the European Union or something of that sort, where again, the Congress cannot make them do that. They don't have the legislative capability to do that, but they can suggest it, and they can say, well, this is what we are resolved for, and this is what we think should happen. All right. And then the last one, and like I said, this doesn't come up terribly often, but it does come up every now and then, is a resolution to actually amend the Constitution. Obviously, this is a bit different because, first of all, it is something which Congress needs to do, but also the states need to do. And so that's why it's a resolution, but also it winds up with particular, as you see, sections, which are what are going to be the new constitutional amendment. And so again, the title, resolution to amend the Constitution to do whatever. And then the resolve pretty much is almost a boilerplate that this article is proposed as amendment to the Constitution, and then it needs to be ratified, et cetera, et cetera. And then the idea is the real meat is, again, the articles, the sections, okay, what is going to be the amendment to the Constitution? And then they're going to enforce it by appropriate legislation, et cetera. And so, again, this gives you an idea of what it is the students are going to be debating. And like I said, most of the time they're bills and resolutions, but every now and then a constitutional amendment will arise as well. And so that's where I wanted to make sure we put that in there. And the one thing to let you know, in case, I know this is being recorded and will be archived somewhere, but these templates all came from the National Speech and Debate Association website. And so if you're getting started with Congress, and maybe you're doing more than just judging, maybe you're going to be coaching it. If you're looking for these templates, you can find them on the NSDA website. All right. The basics in terms of judging itself is the following items. First of all, the one thing is you'll notice that the term I have for our first bullet there is a scorer. All right. The idea is that if you are judging Congress, and again, this is for the beginner, you are going to be assigned the role of a scorer. Some tournaments, they may have one scorer in the session, and others, they will have two. But the one thing, just as a side note, and I didn't put this in here just because, again, this is for the beginner, is there is another judge who is what they call the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is a more experienced judge who has, maybe they've been judging for several years, or maybe they were a competitor and they've been judging for a few years now. But the idea of the parliamentarian is responsible for making sure that the chamber is run well. Again, as I mentioned, there's the presiding officer who is one of the students. But the thing is that if the student winds up making mistakes in procedure or in terms of, okay, who should be speaking next, or when is it appropriate to move to the previous question, which is the idea of when are they going to vote. So if mistakes are made, the point of the parliamentarian is to be there to correct those mistakes. Or if students notice them, if students have questions, they may question the presiding officer, and the parliamentarian may be needed to clarify information. But in any case, as a beginning Congress judge, you will not be asked to do that. Or if you are asked to do that, you might want to let them know, hey, this is my first year judging Congress. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable being a parliamentarian yet. But once you've done it for, I would say, a couple years, or maybe like, depending on your personal learning curve, you might want to consider actually offering yourself as a parliamentarian to a tournament, because those are a little harder to find. Again, people being comfortable with this, or people who have experience in this. All right, so in terms of your role as a scorer, basically the idea is you're going to listen to their speeches. Obviously, this again is a public speaking competition. You're going to give them comments on their speech, and then you're going to give them a score. And then at the end of the chamber, again, at the end of the session, again, maybe 2 hours or 2.5 or even 3 hours, you are going to rank them. All right. And the thing to keep in mind is I have all those 4 sub bullets actually separated because they are different roles, as it were. So you're going, like I said, first of all, you're going to listen to them. And the thing to keep in mind is, like I said, Congress is pretty dynamic. The speeches the students are giving are about 3 minutes long maximum. And so, again, the presiding officer will actually time them. If you've judged other speech events, you know that oftentimes you have to do timing and you have to give time signals. But the presiding officer takes care of that role. So your job is literally to listen to that speech. 3 minutes long. The one thing is, again, in terms of who gets to speak and what side are they on, again, the presiding officer takes care of all that. Your job is to just listen to them and see how well do they handle that side. How well do they stand in affirmation or stand on the pro side of this legislation? Here's why it's needed. Here's what it's going to do. Or how well do they handle the opposition, the negation side, and say, well, here are the dangers of this legislation. If we were to pass it, this is going to be the problem. And the one thing, as all of our debate events should have, is they should be giving you good evidence as well. So they should give you some good arguments, some good ideas, but they should also be giving you good evidence. And also, and this is a typical debate term, is they should also be giving you a good impact to this argument. Why does this argument matter? Okay, so if this legislation will cause this horrible problem, why is that really an issue? What is, in other words, what is so horrible about this problem? So we've said, okay, it's going to cause this. Here's the evidence. Here's the analysis. And then what is the impact? Why does this actually matter? Why does this try to convince the chamber of what should happen, how they should vote? And that's the one thing to keep in mind, again, in terms of that role of the congressional debater, is that they're trying to convince each other. They're trying to convince their fellow senators or representatives, or whatever the chamber decides to call itself. What they're trying to convince them to, when we're going to vote, when we get to that motion to previous question, I want you to vote on this side. And so again, you're going to be listening to that, and as you're listening, you're going to be giving comments. The one thing, and I'll get to in a little bit, at this point, pretty much most, if not all, competitions are using electronic ballots. And actually, when I told some friends of mine I was doing this webinar, one of my friends said, oh, here, we have some slides you can put on your PowerPoint. And so you're going to see, I'll show you some areas where you're going to put your comments as they speak. And the one thing, again, as a tournament coordinator, I always say, please make sure that you try to type your comments as they are speaking. Again, since you're doing it electronically, and obviously the electronically involves worrying about the internet, a friend of mine always suggests type your comments on the side and then do a quick cut and paste and drop it into the little comment box, because if all of a sudden the internet would hiccup and you lose your comments, it can be a little frustrating. But again, it's only a 3-minute speech, so that shouldn't take too long. And then, as I was mentioning, the speech is 3 minutes, and then it is typically followed by a period of questioning. The idea is, just because the speaker got up there and put out their argument doesn't mean that someone's not going to argue back with them. And there's particular times for the speeches, for the questioning time for different types of speeches. But the idea is that once they have given their speech, they are expected to be questioned by other competitors, other people in their chamber. And so you can give some comments on that. I know some judges wind up kind of finishing up their comments as they're listening to the questioning period. But if you can put in a comment or two about how well they handle the questioning, that's always good. But also keep an ear out for who is doing the questioning, because when we get to that last part about the rank, that comes into play as well. All right, but not getting ahead of myself, is once you've heard the speech, you've given comments, the one thing which we ask you do is to give a score. Typically, the score is from 1 to 6. I believe in NSDA districts, at our district tournament for Congress, it actually is 1 to 8. And at nationals, it's 1 to 10, but I'm not sure if I'm exactly correct on those on those point scales. But the idea is that you're asked to give a score for the speech in and of itself. So if the student did a phenomenal job, and I'll use the 1 to 6 scale because that's what we do mainly during the school year. If they did a phenomenal job, they had a great arguments and they had good sources and good analysis and great impacts, and they handled it, you can give them a 6. Or if you thought, all right, they could have done things a little better, maybe give them a 4. But the one thing is, I would say if you give lower points, please try to make sure that you give an explanation of why, especially because, again, if you're a beginner judge, you also may be put into a novice chamber. And so the students may also be new to this. And so they'd appreciate hearing why you gave them the score that you gave them. And so the idea is, once you've listened, you've given comments, you've given a score, then they move on to the next speaker. Now, the one thing is that, as I mentioned, they're questioning and they're talking all along the time that you're giving your comments and you come up with a score. They may be moving on to the next speaker and you're not quite ready yet. So feel free to let them know this. After a while, you kind of get used to the rhythm of, all right, they do the 3-minute speech. Let me finish some comments while they're questioning each other. Oh, that was a good response. Let me type that on there really quickly. You kind of get into that rhythm, and so you keep up with them. But there is no shame in saying, just wait a moment, because the students will typically ask, is this at the standard kind of statement now is, at the leisure of those above me. And so once a student has been recognized and they're ready to give their speech, they will double check, is the presiding officer ready to time them? Is the parliamentarian ready just to jump in case there are any questions of procedure? And then is the scorer, or are the scorers ready? And so if you need to say, oh, just give me one more moment, let me just finish typing this, or give me the score, and then you can tell them when you're ready. The one thing, obviously, again, we are now in the age of virtual tournaments. And so feel free, especially in a virtual tournament, because it is harder to identify that you need another moment or so. So feel free to speak up and let them know that you need another moment before they move on to the next speaker. All right. And so in terms of, like I said, we have these speeches and everything. I realize I don't have this on here specifically, but the format of the debate itself is that it starts off with an authorship or a sponsorship by the student who wrote it or the school that submitted the legislation. And so they will speak, they will be questioned, and then we move into a negation speech, and somebody will stand up and say, here's what's wrong with this, and they will speak and they'll be questioned. And then it literally ping pongs back and forth. There is a pro speech, there is a con speech, there's a pro speech, there's a con speech. And then eventually, once it appears as though the debate has worked its way out, then they will, as I've been saying, move to the previous question, and then they'll vote on that particular legislation and then move on to the next one. Oftentimes, they will take a little, 5-minute break or so in between, make sure that they're all ready to start the next legislation. And that's your cue to get up and stretch a little bit, maybe go use the restroom, and make sure you're ready to start the next piece of legislation as well. But that's kind of, the general format of the debate. We start off with that opening first, affirmative, again, authorship or sponsorship. Then there's a first negative, and then go back and forth in terms of the speeches themselves. All right. Moving on to my next slide then. All right. And again, this is what I was saying. In terms of the speeches, there is, again, the authorship or the sponsorship. The purpose of this, excuse me, is to present why it is we need this piece of legislation. The idea is that this person, again, is either the person who wrote the legislation, or they're from the school that sent in the legislation. And so they're saying, here is what our situation is. Here is the need for this legislation. This is why we must pass this bill, because we must have a law that does X, Y, and Z. Or we must pass this resolution because this is the problem, and the Congress needs to send a message to the states, or send a message to NATO, or send a message to wherever this will go to say this is what needs to happen. And so that is the point of the authorship or the sponsorship, is to lay out what is the need for this, and what will be the benefits once this is passed, and why is this such a wonderful idea, as it were. The first negative then obviously is doing, in a way, the exact opposite, saying, okay, well, here is the situation, but maybe it's not as catastrophic as the affirmative or the authorship or the sponsor is actually saying it is. And here's some evidence that's showing that the problem is resolving itself. Or maybe here are some issues, because if we do this, we're going to get these horrible problems that come about, and those problems are going to be worse than the problem that we're solving. And so maybe this isn't going to be a good idea, or maybe this isn't the way to do this. Maybe it should be more effectively done in another way. So the idea is the first negative is going to point out what do they see as the flaws of this legislation. Why is it going to be a bad idea to actually pass it? And then, as I said, we'll ping pong back and forth between the affirmative and the negative. And usually once you get into the second affirmative, as it were, after the authorship, they will start to actually refute each other's arguments, which again is an important part of a debate. What we always say for Congress is that they do need to make sure, actually for debaters in general, we need to make sure that they address the opponents or the other side's ideas, or else, as we joke, it becomes dueling oratories. We just have the affirmative speaker is speaking, the negative speaker is speaking, and they never relate to each other. They never address each other's ideas. And so they're just speaking in a vacuum. And so the idea of the refutation and the rebuttal is very important, because it gives, it shows an understanding of how the debate is progressing. And so say, for example, I'm wind up being the second or even maybe the third on the affirmative or the pro side of the legislation. I should not just be giving my speech with my ideas. I should start also saying, well, as Representative so-and-so mentioned, here is a concern, but let me address why that's not as big of a concern, right? So there should be some relating to the debate that's come along. And the one thing which I have seen on many congressional debate ballots is, does the speech advance the debate? Again, sometimes what happens, especially beginning congressional debaters, may have their speech written out and they're all ready to go, and they're not paying attention that, well, this person already talked about their first point, and this person talked about their third point, and this person talked about their second point, and they just get up and they read their speech, and they're not saying anything new. The term for that is a rehash. It's like, okay, well, you just got up there and restated what somebody else had done. All right, you didn't really advance the debate. However, if, as I'm listening to them, I realize, okay, yeah, that person just, mentioned my second point, but I have a better piece of evidence than they do. I think mine is more recent, or mine goes into this aspect. If I can get up there and say, okay, well, you heard, Senator so-and-so mentioned this, let me take that a little further. And now I'm advancing the debate. Now I'm saying, okay, here's another part to consider. And so that becomes one of the more nuanced ideas as the congressional debate goes along. All right, and then the last speech, as it were, and this typically should be the last speech, is what's called a crystallization. And actually this term, again, comes from the debate world of, what I call head-to-head debates, public forum and Lincoln Douglas debate. The term of a crystallization is they're kind of boiling it down for each other. Again, they're trying to convince each other. So they're saying, okay, we've now heard, 5 speeches on both sides or 6 speeches on both sides. Here's what it really seems to boil down to. And so we're going to probably vote on this in the next speech or so. It seems as though I'm the last person who wants to speak on this side. So let me boil this down and say, okay, here's where this where this winds up. Let me summarize this for you. Keep in mind these arguments, but the most important ones are this on this side. And so that's why we should vote on this side. All right. And then, as I was mentioning, there is questioning. The one thing which is changing in the congressional debate world is the idea of direct questioning, or what's also called one-to-one questioning. One-to-one is what things used to be, where, okay, someone would give a speech and then the presiding officer would recognize people to question the speaker. And they would say, okay, Senator Smith. And Senator Smith would give the congressional debater, the person who just spoke, a single question. And then the speaker would speak and answer that question. And then Representative Jones would be recognized and they would give a question and then they would get an answer from the speaker. The direct questioning has kind of evolved. And it's come from, again, like I said, kind of that head-to-head debate style, where the person who's questioning actually is given 30 seconds to ask questions and to do follow-up questions. And so they may actually make their questions a little more succinct because they want to be able to hear the answer and then do a quick follow-up, because 30 seconds goes pretty quickly when you're doing this questioning. And so then once they've used up their 30 seconds, then the next person gets another 30 seconds. Like I said, that's something which is moving across the congressional debate world. And so depending on the tournament where you're judging, you should double check how our questioning is supposed to be handled. Is it direct questioning? Is it one-to-one? Also, what I've seen at some tournaments is in preliminary rounds, it's one-to-one, but when they get to finals, it becomes direct questioning. So again, that's just on you. And the thing is that, again, you as a new coach or a new judge, you might want to even ask, again, like I said, the parliamentarian who is supposed to know all those details, how things are going to go, just so you have an idea. All right, moving on then. All right, and then the idea of the ballot, and as I was talking about, the score versus the rank. And so again, the idea is for every speech that you hear, you are giving a score. Then at the end of the session, at the end of the session, the 2 hours or 3 hours, you will be asked to rank your top 8, 6, probably 8, usually 8 is kind of the standard number, congressional debaters in your chamber. And so you will have heard maybe 2 speeches from everybody, or maybe this person only gave 1 speech. And then you're going to rank them in terms of, okay, who do you think did the best job as a congressional debater? And the one thing, and you'll hear, I do actually have a couple of videos from former students of mine, the idea of considering the presiding officer. Remember, again, the presiding officer removed themselves from the debate to help run the chamber, to make sure that it was efficient, to make sure that they could get in speeches and have good, effective questioning, and make sure that this legislation got its fair due in a debate. And so the presiding officer is also something that should be considered in your ranking. What I always say when I do an overview at a tournament is, again, remember the idea of them playing the role of a congressman. So whether it is to be the advocate for this legislator or to be standing in opposition to this legislation, that is the role that the speakers chose. But remember the role of the presiding officer. How well did that student play that role? And so that usually helps judges kind of figure out, well, where are you going to put them in your ranking? And I know for the NSDA, I believe for the district tournament and nationals, we actually ask on the ballot to check, did you consider, not that you had to put them in any particular place, but did you consider them as in your top 8? And if a student obviously did a very poor job, the parliamentarian had to step in often and correct mistakes, then maybe you're not putting that presiding officer in your top 8. But if they did a seamless job, everything was smoothly run, and maybe you don't even remember what the voice of the parliamentarian sounds like, that means the presiding officer did a very good job and maybe should be in your top 8 or maybe even your top 3. But again, that's your decision. But again, that's the difference between the score and the rank. All right, these next several slides, again, my friend Jeff Kahn from Strathaven High School here in Pennsylvania told me that I could use these. And what he's showing is when you're doing electronic balloting, the idea of the speech scores versus the ranking. And so as you see, Jeff made himself a judge. He's in whatever room there, Varsity Congressional Debate Session 1. And the idea is we're going to look at how you're going to put in your comments and your scores for the speeches. The one thing is if you're in an area, and I know in Pennsylvania we still have a few areas that still do some on paper ballots. There are two separate ballots typically. There will be a score sheet for the speeches, and then there'll be an actual rank sheet. And so that, in a way, that might be a little easier than doing it electronically because you actually have two pieces of paper that you're going to be doing. But you'll have speech scores and then ranking. All right, and you'll notice that it actually is a drop-down menu. And so it says there in the middle, select a speaker, and you notice that Jeff has clicked, ballot test debater 1, whose name is debater 1. And then you will see, okay, there's a little box here. And so you can type in the topic or the bill that they are speaking on. Notice that it says the side that they're on. Are they for the bill? Are they against the bill? And then there's the comments and feedback, which you would be typing in as you go along. And then notice at the very bottom, points for this speech. As I was saying, once you have heard their speech and maybe you've been listening to the questioning, you will put in a score again from 1 to 6. This was actually from a tournament, a regular season tournament. So again, the score is 1 to 6. And the one thing to notice in the top right, or not necessarily quite the top, is where it says presiding officer. So notice it says an N right now because this student particularly wasn't the presiding officer. But if they were, then you would click that and then would identify the person as such, and you can give them comments on how well they were a presiding officer. All right, and so once you have given, you said, okay, here's this one. And then notice, and it's maybe a little hard to see, sorry, where it says save new speech, that little blue button there. The idea is once you're done with that one, you click that, and now you're ready to go to the next speech for that person. And again, the students will identify themselves. They'll be called on by the presiding officer, and they'll wait for you. So if you need to switch to the next person again, you just pull down the speaker menu and say, okay, here's the next person, and what's their next speech, etc. All right, and then notice this one does have the presiding officer now clicked. And so this was debater number 9, and that was the presiding officer. And notice that it allows you to give them comments and their presiding officer. The one thing is, and again, you probably should check with the tournament director, is that typically they're supposed to get comments and a score every hour. That's actually the NSDA actually allows the student to earn points per hour, and so they should be getting a new score every hour. And so you might want to just double check with the tournament director about how that is done. All right, and then here is the ranking. And the one thing you'll notice, it says give no rank higher than 9, and blanks will be auto-filled with a 9. So this is kind of a standard operating procedure on electronic balloting is, okay, you're going to be asked to rank your top 8, numbers 9 to 18 or 9 to 12 or whatever it might be. You don't have to give a rank to it all because, again, as it says there, blanks will be auto-filled in with a 9. And so all you have to do is once you have you finished, the session is pretty much done. You finished your comments and score for that last speech. And now they're taking a break for maybe a half an hour or so. Your last job is to then rank again your top speakers, 1 to, again, 8 or whatever the tournament asks you to. And then you'll notice, okay, once you get to that particular level, you don't have to go any further. The parliamentarian, again, the more experienced judge, the person who's kind of controlling the chamber, they actually have to rank everybody. So, but that's also because they're there the entire preliminary sessions or the final session, whatever. So they actually rank everyone in their role. All right. The last couple items that I have here, like I said, I was asked actually. I also am a member of the Pennsylvania Speech and Debate Association, which is our coaches conference in Pennsylvania. And this past conference in October, somebody had asked they would like to have students give comments about how they think what judges should hear. What did they always want to tell judges when they were competitors? And so I have 2 quick little videos from students that graduated last year, students of mine that gave their ideas of what are some things that congressional debate judges should know. And I thought because this is, again, for all the beginner idea, that this actually might be helpful to you. And so let me show you these 2 really quickly.
Hi there, my name is Cameron Hines, and I am currently a first-year student studying industrial and labor relations at Cornell University. I competed for 6 years on the Southern Lehigh speech and debate team under the direction of Mr. David Long. And the vast majority of my time on the debate team was spent with congressional debate. So Mr. Long asked me to kind of compile a brief video explaining my experience in Congress and some of the facets I think make for an effective congressional debate judge. So in thinking about this video, I thought of 3 factors that I think make for the best judges possible within Congress. So the first factor that I look for in terms of what makes for a good judge is, does the judge recognize what the assignment is? So congressional debate is not like policy debate, where you're just focused on the debate aspect, right? Congressional debate is as much a performance event as it is a debate event. So ask yourself, in the room, who is most likely to become an elected member of Congress? The individuals who are very active in the chamber, asking questions, raising their placards for speeches, who are making sort of backroom deals during recesses and who are kind of negotiating with their fellow members. Those are the people who are the leaders in the chamber. Those are the individuals who are most likely to become real members of Congress. And I would always recommend kind of putting those people very high in your rankings when deciding who should get the 1, 2, 3, et cetera ranks. And then second, make sure you rank the PO, the presiding officer. The presiding officer will be elected by his or her other colleagues or congressional debate peers at the beginning of the round, just to make sure that the round goes smoothly. So a poor PO can really tank the interest and engagement level of a round, but a successful PO is very much a member of the chamber and can really help make a session go more efficiently. So if you like the presiding officer, be sure to rank them well. And then third, this almost goes without saying, but so many judges don't abide by this. Try your best to be unbiased with your beliefs when you walk into the room. I have seen so many stickers on laptops and on water bottles from judges supporting either Democrats or Republicans or third-party candidates or individual causes, like showing that they are pro-life or pro-choice or something in between. Your views do not matter in the context of the congressional debate round, right? We're here for the students. So when students see that a certain judge has volunteered for Planned Parenthood or the Trump campaign or anything in between, that student is going to feel like they need to kind of pander to that judge's political beliefs, which is not what congressional debate should be about. So just being mindful of the fact that students do see kind of the cues that judges give off. So keep any outward signs of political loyalties separate from your career as a judge. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and best of luck this year judging.
All right, here's my other students.
Hi, I'm Kayla Howie, and I'm a freshman at Bucknell University. Prior to coming here, I spent 5 years in congressional debate. And what was really fun was at my graduation, I got a big folder from my coach filled with all of the ballots that I've gotten over my 5 years competing. And they were a lot of fun to read, let me tell you. I had had a lot of varying experiences with ballots. But what was really interesting to me was to see that my beginning ballots as a novice were actually more helpful to me than the ones that I received later as I grew as a competitor. And that makes a ton of sense. It's so much easier to tell a competitor that they need to look up from their paper, that eye contact is extremely important, that they need to project their voice because you can't hear them from the back of the room. Maybe that they need to be more prepared for questions in their speech. Maybe their analysis is lacking. It's easy to pinpoint these simple and basic steps to becoming a good competitor, but it's much harder when the competitors are all really good. And it's okay. We like the compliments. I can't pretend that I didn't smile when I got ballots back that said that I did great. But it was kind of hard when there was nothing that told me what to work on, because I knew that I could be better as a competitor, but my ballots weren't telling me how I could change. So when competitors do get to be in varsity and they're going against better competitors, the only way to stand apart from them is the little things. Does the blocking add to the speech and help you understand what I'm saying? Or does it distract you and make you focus on where I'm walking rather than what I'm saying? Should I be using better, more intensive sources that provide a better impact? Am I even showing you the impact in my speech of why this bill is absolutely necessary or absolutely dangerous? Do you understand why this bill is important? Do I keep your attention? Because I know as a judge and as a competitor, these rounds are obnoxiously long, and having to pay attention to every single speech gets tiring. So learning how to keep people's attention will A, make the round better, and B, make the competitors better. Should we be more involved? Are we not adding enough from each previous speech and making sure that we're including information that previous competitors have stated? So if I were to say how to be the best judge in Congress possible, I would definitely say to keep the compliments coming. We don't want to look at our ballots and be saddened by the results, because at the end of the day, we are trying our best to succeed. But we definitely want to know where we can improve. At the end of the day, these competitions are to make us better public speakers and better competitors. So if there's anything at all that we can improve on, we want to be able to see it. We want to leave each tournament with something clear to work on and be better for the next tournament. So I hope that this video was at all helpful. And I'd like to thank everyone who's ever been a judge, because I know from experience that it is a lot of time and effort when you could be doing something else. So thank you so, so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Hi.
All right, and that finishes my presentation here. I know I went, I also looked at the clock. I'm like, oh, okay, we do have some time for questions. we always ask, do you think you're going to fill your time? I'm like, yeah, I should be able to. I'm like, oh my, I went quite a bit. So, all right, questions, please.
You did a wonderful job, David. Let's just start by thanking David for all of his wisdom and information. I learned so much tonight, so thank you again. We have one question in the Q&A already. I'm going to pose that one to you, and I'm going to ask everyone to please type in any other questions that come to you. So our first question is, where can I find examples of good speeches? For example, authorship, sponsorship, first negative rebuttal, and crystallization.
I would say what I usually do with my students is if you're a national, I assume you're a National Speech and Debate Association member, is that in the resources that you can get to, there are videos of prior competitions. There are videos from nationals. Again, as was mentioned in my introduction, I help with the Congressional Debate tab at nationals, and we will record final rounds of the House and the Senate. And so those are put up as resources. And so I will oftentimes, when I'm getting my team started, I will show videos, and I do this for all my students. And so I'll show finals of dramatic interpretation, finals of oratory, finals of Congress, and go through. All right, and I will literally go through, okay, let's watch the first, 5 speeches or so. And okay, look, here's the authorship, here's that first negative. And now, okay, now here's how they're doing this and here's how they're doing that. And then, like I said, the crystallization comes at the end. And so I would say, use the resources that NSDA has already and check out those videos.
Thank you. Hope that answers your question. Next, we have, please discuss whether students can give more than one speech in the session, especially whether that student can give one for the bill and another against the bill.
All right. First of all, yes, students can give multiple speeches. Usually those are on different pieces of legislation. As I mentioned, once we go through, we have the authorship, the negative, and we ping pong back and forth, and then we decide to vote. Then they move on to the next legislation. They typically will then speak on the next piece of legislation. The one aspect that I didn't get into is, and again, because this is again something that is regulated by the parliamentarian and the presiding officer, but is something which a scorer should be aware of, is that in terms of who gets to speak next, it is done by what is called precedence and recency. The idea, and this is obviously doesn't happen in the actual Congress, it's more just to make sure things are fair for the competitors, is that, as the presiding officer is deciding, okay, who are we going to listen to next? The students will either stand up or they'll show their placard with their name on it. The first preference, or the precedence, goes to who have we not heard from at all. So say there are 3 people who want to speak next. One person has spoken twice, one person has only spoken once, and one has not spoken at all. We pick the one that hasn't spoken at all because we want to hear from everybody. If they happen to be tied in terms of how many times have they spoken, then we fall back on what's called recency and say, well, whoever spoke furthest back, they have the better recency. We're now going to hear them next. And so say again, Representative Jones spoke, the second speech on, 2 legislations ago, and Representative Smith just finished up the crystallization of the previous. Representative Jones goes because they haven't been heard from lately. And so there is that aspect. In terms of speaking on the opposite sides of a piece of legislation, technically, I believe you can do that. I'm trying to think, there are tournament rules that prevent that, but I would say in a way it's almost a dangerous game to play because the judge will not understand which side are you really on. Because remember, the one thing which is different in congressional debate versus, like I said, kind of a head-to-head where, again, Lincoln Douglas or cross-sex policy debate, is that they're assigned a side and they go back and forth on sides. In congressional debate, the students choose their side. And so to say, okay, well, I'm going to give a first negation, or I'm going to do a negation speech, and then, 3 speeches or 4 speeches later, I'm going to do an affirmative speech, looks a little odd. The optics are a little confusing. And so usually students don't do that. But like I said, I don't sure there's anything necessarily that says they can't. It's just, it would look very, very odd unless they can say, well, having heard this, I've decided I have changed my mind. But like I said, usually that doesn't happen. So I hope that answers the question. Let me know if I didn't completely answer that question.
We got 2 more questions that just came in.
Okay.
So hopefully that does answer your question. If not, feel free to write something in the chat and I will present it to Coach Long. What is the best way to communicate to contestants that you don't prefer cheap shots? The ballot, the judge paradigms at the start of the round, or is that considered a judging bias?
In terms of cheap shots, I assume that in terms of sometimes, obviously, because again, they're together and again, it's en masse, that sometimes there may be little snipes that get done, or sometimes they're even done unintentionally. I've heard some of my students have come back and said, I didn't mean to, they all of a sudden they jumped on such and such. But I would say the best way to put out your preferences is in the paradigm, if that's something which is asked for by the tournament. Oftentimes speech in Congress, judges aren't necessarily asked for a paradigm. That's usually, again, more on that head-to-head debate, Lincoln Douglas, public forum, etc. But if you are allowed to give that, or again, they mentioned the idea of in the beginning of the session, especially if it's a final round or if it's more of a higher level competition, they may ask the presiding officer may ask the scorers if they have any particular preferences. And that's where, feel free to mention that. But I would say also mention it on the ballot. And the reason I say this, and from having coached for the number of years I have, and also having friends of mine that has helped me with running tournaments, is remember the coach of the student is not there. They don't know what cheap shot may have been taken by their student. And so I always say, yes, tell them on the paradigm, tell them in the beginning. But if something comes up that you're just like, hold on, that was really, really not appropriate. There is supposed to be a decorum to congressional debate. Maybe like you're a little, maybe a little too aggressive in your questioning style, or maybe you need to rephrase this because that comment could be taken as offensive. And obviously, the NSDA, the NCFL, the Pennsylvania High School Speech League, we are all in the last several years trying to work on having equity and inclusion and making sure that people are not are not leaving a tournament feeling as though they're not welcome. And so, but yeah, I would say make sure it goes on the ballot as well, so the coach then can see it and maybe have that heart-to-heart with a student and say, hold on, this is like the third or fourth time we've seen that you're a little too aggressive. Let's work on that. Let's pull that back a bit. So.
Excellent. One more question. How much to argumentative style? How much does it matter? Argumentative style in terms of collaborative versus competitive?
That's an interesting question in terms of, again, collaboration versus competitive. The one thing which has changed as the years have gone on is that some of the peer influence on the event has been removed. And I think part of it is because it kind of could become the old boys network, as it were. It's like, okay, new programs or new students trying to be competitive are almost blocked out by people who have a long-standing tradition of their schools or of their programs. And so it used to be that when students got to tournaments, all of a sudden people would be going up to them and saying, well, hey, you're new to this. Let's talk. I'd like to run for presiding officer. Would you vote for me? I think that still happens to a point, but some of that has been removed. There actually used to be a student vote in some competitions. And actually, I know for our state league, we still use a student vote. It kind of serves as an extra scorer, not getting in all those details. But the thing is that sometimes people look at that, again, like I said, as manipulative or playing games, as it were. But I would say at this point, more of the what's more effective is the argumentation. But the one thing, again, and back to the comment, the question about the cheap shots here and there, is that the argumentation should be logically sound, and making cheap shots at a competitor is not logical. That's a logical fallacy. That that's an ad hominem. We're attacking the person, not the argument. And so I would say, yes, you have to make sure that there is this understanding that you are collaborating, that, okay, you are respectful, even though you're disagreeing. You don't have to say, well, this person just, is completely lost in what they're saying. You can say, well, this person put this idea out there, but they're not quite understanding this. So you don't have to be, don't have to be lashing out at anybody, but you can, again, agree or disagree, as it were, civilly. And that I would say is something we all need nowadays.
I completely agree with that. So do we have any other questions?
I see there's something in the
For
chat, or
Coach
is that just an old version?
I got that one.
Okay.
I was able to ask you that question. And then we had another 3 come in through the Q&A. So you've answered 4 questions so far.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. We got 2 more. Just came in through Q&A.
All righty.
I judged for the first time and the contestants kept saying status quo and net cost. What do those terms mean in layman's terms?
All right. That's a very good question to ask, because, again, the students get themselves in their own little bubble. They forget that they're talking to real people, as it were. Sometimes you don't know them. The term status quo basically is, as the other term you can use, is the present system. What are things at this moment? And so that is what we mean by the status quo. So if you remember when I went through the parts of the resolution, and it was whereas this and whereas, this is the situation. The status quo is what are things like at this moment. The net cost idea is the idea of, okay, so in the end, what are things going to be doing? What are the benefits we're going to get, but what are the disadvantages we're going to get? Or it may literally be the idea of the cost. The economics term is the cost benefit analysis. Okay, if you have to pay this much, but you're only making this much value out of it, is it worth that? And so that, I think, is what we refer to as the net cost. Is, okay, what are you doing? What are the effects in the end? I know in terms of Lincoln Douglas debate or public forum debate resolutions, the term they use is on balance. So once we've weighed everything out, here are the advantages, here are the disadvantages. What is the net cost? What is it in the end?
Thank you. Another question. Is there an advanced judging session? So just to clarify for the attendee, are you asking for an advanced Congress judging training? So the next step beyond this one that Coach Long is presenting, just to clarify. That's exactly what they're asking.
That's what I thought. That'll be next year's webinar.
Yeah, we'll have to get that on the books. That's a great question. Are there any others? All right, if there are no other questions, Coach Long, are you okay sharing how to contact you or your socials or anything like that?
Sure thing. I'll admit I'm not on any social media. I'll admit that's kind of the one thing, is I'm not on social media, but I will put in the chat my email address and everything. That's the one way I do contact. My brother makes fun of me. Is always like, oh, these people are looking for you on Facebook. I'm like, give them my email. That's what I do. But yeah, this is my email address. Let me fix that. There you go. And yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody if they have questions at longdr@hotmail.com. The one thing is, obviously, put in the topic, or the subject, Congress question. And I love to hear back from people. And yeah, so feel free. And also, as was mentioned, I actually coach. I'm the only coach at my school. So I coach everything. I coach the interps, the debate, the head-to-head debates, the Congress, the speakers, etc. So I coach everything. So if you have questions about other topics, let me know as well. So.
Thank you. Are there any other things you'd like to share with us, or any other questions, anybody?
I don't think anything else to share. I just, this has been a big honor. I really was, when you asked me for this, I was like, me, why would you want me? I just kind of help out where I can, but I do appreciate the opportunity to help out here. And I
think it's obvious. Look at this. This was, I think we all learned quite a bit tonight.
I'm glad. Thank you. I do in my local area, the Allentown, Pennsylvania area doesn't have that many schools and programs. And so as a lead director for the NCFL in the area as well, I'm oftentimes getting programs started. So I love doing this. So if I can be of any help to anyone, please let me know.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Again, Coach Long, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I can't wait to put this on the website and for other people to be able to see it. I do want to, again, remind everyone that there are other opportunities to be involved with the Springboard series. We have a Rhetoric 101, which is actually being hosted by a student who is a former national champion. That's next Monday. And then the Monday after, we are doing Pro-Con Challenge. So the coach of the 2021 national champion in Pro-Con Challenge is speaking on the last Monday of the month. So you won't want to miss either of those. We also, like I said, Springboard is also supporting the Last Chance Qualifier. So if you have questions about that, please get in touch with me. And I would also encourage you to sign up for one of our newsletters, one of the NSDA's newsletters, so that you will know when our Springboard series returns in the fall. We will return with speech and debate competitions that will be free online after school. So you won't want to miss it. These are great practice opportunities, and it works for judges too. This is a great chance for you to maybe judge Congress in our Rising Stars division, which is our novice division, or in our open division, which is our more experienced students. So thank you again, everyone, and thank you especially, Coach Long. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.